Hello, Bio20, and welcome to the Muscular System and Homeostasis. Today, we're looking at what happens when you have different muscle types and how those functions, how they're set up. And we're going to kind of start talking about how muscles contract. So today, you're learning about the variety of muscles found in the body and how they support the body's functions. By the end of today, the goal is to identify muscle types by knowing the three names and their functions, as well as being able to identify them under a microscope. You want to be able to also explain where each of those muscles is located in the body, how they function, as I said earlier, and then be able to diagram how the muscles are put together all the way down to the smallest parts, which are called myofilaments. So we're going to be talking today about how muscles maintain homeostasis. So homeo meaning similar, and stasis meaning the balance in our body. So we want to keep a balance within our body and maintain certain important features, such as our body temperature. Our body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, and most of the temperature is maintained by generating of the muscle contractions. So when you take your temperature and your doctor says, yeah, you're fine, you don't have a fever, it's because your muscles are contracting. Your skeletal muscles are all over your body. And even without realizing it, you have small little contractions, things are moving, and you generate heat by this muscle activity. Now, how does that happen? We're going to talk about that later. But one thing you need to know is that muscles maintain our internal body temperature really well. So what our muscles do is they are a specialized unit that convert chemical energy into kinetic energy. So chemical energy is what we learned is found in ATP, that's a chemical, and then kinetic energy means movement. All right. So all muscles contract or shorten, and when they do, they're utilizing that conversion. When muscles contract, some part of the body or the entire body will end up moving. So we have a couple of different types of muscles found in the body that are really important. We're instead going to talk about the types of muscles. So in your notes, you have to fill out the three different types. So the first one is cardiac muscle. And this muscle is located at your heart. Your heart has a very different muscle than the rest of the body. It is its own muscle. And if you think about how much your heart is utilized, it makes sense that it needs to be made out of a very hardy muscle. Get it? It needs to work really well, okay? So the appearance is that they are striated, tubular, and branched. Now that's not going to make a lot of sense right now, but we will talk about what that looks like here in a second. Let's just write down what those appearances are. And then number of nuclei. So inside each muscle, there's nuclei. So you have to remember that every muscle has got cells in it. Well, each nuclei is found within the piece of one muscle. So a cardiac muscle only has one. And the type of contraction it goes through is what we would call involuntary, meaning we don't actually make it contract. It does it on its own from other signals that are sent around our body. So involuntary means not done by thought or not done by us. It's done all on its own. Our brain regulates it. We don't think about it. It's just done. Now we also have smooth muscle. Now smooth muscle is located on most of the walls of our organs. We're going to learn about smooth muscle a lot when we talk about the esophagus, when we talk about our small intestine and our large intestine and a bunch of different other organs, okay? Now the thing about this is this appearance is non-striated. So again, you're probably thinking, well, what does striated mean? I will talk about that. I'll show you guys in a minute. Just make sure we write down the appearance is non-striated. Again, it does not have a lot of nuclei, just one. And again, it contracts involuntary, meaning our brain is regulating the peristaltic movements of our esophagus and our stomach, for example, our small intestines. Those are just examples, all right? The very last one, which is now going to be what we mostly talk about for the rest of this unit, which is the muscle unit, we're going to really focus in on skeletal muscles. Smooth muscles, we're going to talk about in digestion quite a bit. Cardiac muscle, we're going to talk about a little bit in circulation. So we're going to kind of have those on the side, but we're really going to focus in on skeletal. So skeletal muscles are found attached to bones. So if you think about bicep, tricep, lats, deltoids, quads, hamstrings, calf muscles, all of those are different types of muscles. You have tiny little muscles on the sides of your eyes that help your eyes twitch and blink. You have muscles that located all along your jaw that help you smile and frown. There's muscles everywhere. All right, so they're attached to where we have bones. Now, again, they appear striated and tubular. Again, you're probably like, I'm not sure what that means, but we will get there in a minute. All right, so that's what they appear like. Now, the thing about the skeletal muscles that make them very different from smooth and cardiac is that when we think about the number of nuclei found in them, we say many, meaning there's a ton of them, and we'll kind of see that here in a minute. But where there's nuclei, that also means there's a lot of mitochondria, which you might remember from earlier, mitochondria is where cellular respiration takes place. It's really important because we make ATP in cellular respiration. And we're going to talk about how ATP is really, really, really crucial to skeletal muscle contractions. So keep that in mind. Lots of mitochondria found in this area, which is really important. Now, when we talk about the type of contraction, we say voluntary. Now, this makes it hard to say because I don't always think about what I'm writing when I'm writing with a pen. I pick up a pen and I start writing. But the process of picking up the pen to write is a voluntary movement. The movement of my hands when I'm talking is a voluntary movement. Okay, these are things that we don't have to put a ton of thought into, but they are not regulated by our body through feedback loops and through signals from our brain. Okay, our body has to make a conscious effort to move our muscles in the skeletal muscles. So now let's talk about what I meant by those appearances. So here are some pictures. So if we're comparing cardiac muscles to smooth muscles to skeletal muscles, this is what I mean by the differences of the nuclei, this striated and the tubular. So let's take, for example, the cardiac muscle versus the skeletal muscle. Both of them are striated and tubular. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, means they look like tubes. So if you look at this one here and you look at this one here, they look like they're a tube. That is tubular. So if we're looking at underneath the microscope, you can see right here, this is one tube. If you look here, you can kind of see the striping down. That's another tube here. Okay, tubular just means that they look like essentially a tube. Striated, think of striations, think stripes. Striations meaning that looks like they have stripes. So if you look at this one, this is very pronounced, the dark stripe to the light stripe. This one is a little bit harder to see in the actual microscope picture, but over here you can see it on the drawing. So that is what we mean by striations, meaning they look like they have stripes. Smooth muscles, on the other hand, don't have any of that. They're not striated. They're not really perfectly tubular either, okay? So this is what it looks like. And when we actually dissect and do some dissections, you're going to see kind of a little bit more of the differences between the muscles too, how thick they feel, how different they feel, and those kinds of things. So I talked earlier on about homeostasis and how it helps maintain body temperature. And I said that happens because a muscle contracts when they're shortening. Now, this is really important because what you have to understand is now we're talking only about skeletal muscles, and skeletal muscles work in pairs. So when one contracts, the other is relaxed. So when a muscle shortens, we call it a contraction, meaning they pull from one end to the other, closing the gap between the two parts. So this is a relaxed bicep muscle. You can see the ends of these two muscles are quite a distance away. When I contract my muscle, meaning I move my arm up and I contract this one right here, I move the ends of my muscles as close together as possible and bunch that muscle nice and tight together, okay? That's a contraction, they pull, all right? Now the thing is whenever a bicep muscle is contracted, it means the opposing muscle has to be relaxed. So the opposing muscle is right here, which is the tricep. You can see the tricep is as elongated as it can be, it is as relaxed as possible. Now, it's weird to think that if your arms are just hanging at the side of your body and your bicep is relaxed, that actually means your tricep is contracted. And if you think about it, if you're just hanging your arm there, the way to look at someone's defined tricep muscle is by putting their arm straight beside their body and flexing it. And that's because that's when their tricep muscle is contracted. So in order for muscles to move or create movement in the body, they have to work in pairs. So why do they need to work in pairs? What is the function of our skeletal muscles? Well, it's really important that all skeletal muscles support the body. Okay, so what they're doing is they're contractions of these skeletal muscles, the opposing forces around them. Also, they oppose the force of gravity. The reason we can stand up is because of the way our muscles are situated. Our skeletal muscles also help move our bones. That sounds weird. Bones don't really move, but what it means is that whenever we want to walk, we move because our muscles can contract. They're all around our leg bones, our arm bones. So as our muscles contract, they allow us to walk forward, walk backwards, swim through water. But you also have to think of simple things like smiling or blinking your eyes or twitching your nose. Those all also require muscle movements. I've already talked about this one kind of at length, but our body's temperature is maintained because during a contraction, we take the ATP from cellular respiration and we break it down. We know that the releasing of breaking of bonds releases a lot of heat. So ATP breaking down actually produces a lot of heat, which helps maintain our muscles, like keeping them warm, which helps maintain our internal body temperature. If you've ever worked out, you get really hot when you're working out, and that's because you're constantly using your muscles, breaking down that ATP, creating a ton of energy and a ton of output of heat. Skeletal muscles also protect our internal organs and stabilize our joints. It's really important that our internal organs are not damaged. We know that our heart is important, our lungs are important, all those things are important. So our muscles, our skeletal muscles, protect them in a lot of ways. Our rib cage is made out of bones, and between every single rib is a set of muscles that helps our rib cage expand when we take a deep breath in. That rib cage, and along with those muscles, protect our lungs. Our joints and our tendons, that are where our bones are held together, are also surrounded by muscle in order to help protect them. So let's look at the hierarchy of the muscle structure. So here is a bone, and at the end of the bone is where our tendon starts. All right. And as you can see, as that tendon comes down, we're going to change it into muscle. So this entire structure is a muscle. So muscle is the big, big picture. When I say your bicep muscle, I'm talking about one big, big piece. All right. But if you take that muscle and start to break it down, kind of think of like one of those Twizzlers that you peel, okay? Your muscle's kind of like that. It's structured into parts that are smaller and smaller and smaller. So within an entire muscle, you can pull one piece out, which is covered by nerves, and those nerves help with muscle contraction. And we call this a muscle fiber bundle because inside of every one of these is another set of small pieces that include the muscle fiber. So if we were to pull one of these out, this is a muscle fiber. So it takes tons of these to make up a bundle and a bunch of bundles to make up a muscle. Now, within that muscle fiber, we have what we call myofibrils. Again, another piece that we can pull out, another smaller piece. And this myofibril, as you can see here, are made up of two different colors, blues and reds right here. And those are called myofilaments. And those are the things we're going to focus in really, really closely to when we talk about a muscle contraction. So the last thing I want to go through really quickly is some key vocabulary that you're going to hear throughout the rest of this chapter. So when I say a muscle fiber, okay, let's go back, sorry, a muscle fiber, I'm talking about this whole structure right here. The muscle fiber includes the myofibrils and the myofilaments, okay? So we're going to talk about the sarcolemma, the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and there's also blood vessels that run around here. So what we're talking about is the following. In a muscle fibril, where there's blood vessels, you have something called myoglobin. And around that is an oxygen binding pigment. Now, you've never heard about hemoglobin, but you will. Hemoglobin is found in your blood, okay? But myoglobin is a really special, unique molecule that takes on oxygen and binds it really closely so that the skeletal muscle has oxygen. And we know that oxygen is needed to undergo cellular respiration. So we need oxygen in our muscles to go to the mitochondria so we can make a lot of ATP. The sarcoplasm is essentially the cytoplasm of the muscle fiber. So if you think back to Science 10, cytoplasm, what is that? Essentially, it is like a jelly that where there's lots of nutrients that are there. So the sarcoplasm is actually where we're going to find myoglobin and where we're going to find glycogen. Now, glycogen is a really high energy molecule that when you break it down makes glucose, and we know that glucose then can go on to be used in cellular respiration. So storing glycogen in our muscles makes sense to have access to glucose right away if we want to go through cellular respiration. The sarcoplasmic reticulum is the area where calcium ions are stored. Now we're going to talk in depth about calcium ions and why we need them, but just know that this is the house where they're held. And then last but not least is the sarcolemma, which is the membrane of the muscle fiber. So essentially it goes around the muscle fiber and it allows things to enter and exit. So that is it. Those are the things that you need to know as an introduction to muscles. If you have any questions, please let me know.